This is Steve Gaterman, and I have Dan Hickman assisting me in this presentation of buying after a foreclosure or short sale. Had quite a few people registered. We'll wait just a couple minutes before we kick this off to get some people time to log on. And we have done these webinars through the CBR probably since July, I think, of last year, Dan. And we have several more slated for the months ahead. So keep watching the announcements from Annette as far as what's coming out. We're trying to pick topics that are timely and geared for the market, what's going on now. So we will take suggestions as far as future topics. And to facilitate that, I would just send an email to Annette Shamil as far as any future topics. So I guess let's go ahead and get started for those that are already logged on. This has become, in the last several years, more of an issue, especially the short sale, and it's changed somewhat as well. I want to preface this by saying that each lender may have a little bit different guideline on how they look at foreclosures and short sales. So we're going to give you kind of a broad-based guidelines that works with most lenders, but you might see some lenders that are a little bit less stringent and a little bit looser, if you will, and also a little tighter on some of these. So in all cases, you always should check with the lender you're dealing with to find out what their specific guidelines are. But these are pretty well universally area-wide as far as the guidelines we're going to be able to use and be able to know what you can do. Financing available for a buyer who has foreclosure or short sale will depend upon the loan program selected. So we'll go through some of the programs. Of course, we're going to talk about the FHA, VA, and conventional. So on VA and buying foreclosure also would be the same category of a deed in lieu of foreclosure, where the deed is given back prior to foreclosure. The guidelines are pretty much the same with most programs. But with VA, it's a little bit looser. It's about 2 years after a foreclosure and 2 years after completion date. And that's key because once someone gets foreclosed upon, when we start counting the days, the date the deed was transferred is usually what most lenders will use as the start date to determine if it's been 2 years, whatever the case might be. So they may have been foreclosed on, the client you're talking to, but it's important to find out when the deed was transferred, and that's, of course, at the records at the county courthouse. On FHA, it's going to be a little longer, about 3 years, and 3 years after completion date as well on an FHA, so 1 year more than VA. There are some exceptions to that with FHA. If there were situations that were out of the ordinary or out of the control of the buyer, extenuating circumstances are called as well, they will sometimes look at less than 3 years. It depends on the situation. The most common is a serious illness that was unexpected, the death of the wage earner, and they had good credit prior to that happening. Divorce usually is not a reason that would qualify, for example, but there are some and few that will do in less than 3 years. Short sale falls in the category typically of the foreclosure, which is needing 3 years from the short sale to be able to qualify, except financing is now available for buyers that have a mortgage installed prior to that, and if the lien was released with no deficiency, which means is that if they did a short sale and they have made their payments on time right before the short sale and there was not a deficiency balance owed, meaning that that short that was being established and been agreed upon, if that is a debt that is held against those customers, those buyers, then this would not qualify. And you may not know until you do the research, and sometimes the client doesn't know either until they do the research. But in many cases, if it is released, they would sign some documents as part of that short sale saying it's fully released and not owed again. But that's the exception, less than the 3 years. Conventional, a little bit different. You need a little more time on conventional. It can be up to 7 years after a foreclosure. But there are some situations that could be less as well. So in conventional, again, if the buyer conventional loan has less than at least 3 years, if there's been extenuating circumstances, somewhat like FHA, so extenuating circumstances less about 3 years for conventional, and if not, 7 years. So non-reoccurring events that are beyond the buyer's control, sudden, significant, and prolonged reduction in income, or catastrophic increase in financial obligations. That is taken from the guidelines from the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guideline book. Serious illness, death, loss of employment perhaps may qualify, but as FHA, typically a divorce is not going to be in the category of extenuating circumstances. Buying after a deed in lieu foreclosure for conventional, someone that obtains a conventional loan under the standard 7-year guidelines, deed in lieu foreclosure, but buyer can obtain conventional financing if they put 10% down in 4 years after a deed in lieu or short sale. So there are some things in between that 7-year period that we can do. And again, as I said before, it depends on the lender. Buyers obtaining a conventional loan with 20% down, 80% LTV, or below the 2 years after deed in lieu foreclosure or short sale. So if they have 20% down on a conventional loan, they can sometimes also be able to qualify, again, with the extenuating circumstances. Yeah, we got a died in lieu instead of deed in lieu, so sort of that typo we're laughing here. It wasn't checked and double checked, so apologize for that. Let's see here. Buying may obtain for conventional financing at 10% down just 2 years after the deed in lieu, or the died in lieu, and the short sale, again, with circumstances. Guidelines and interpretations of extenuating circumstances and required down payment can vary slightly from lender to lender, as we've said. So a good thing to do is if you have a customer that wants to buy and they may be in one of these guidelines that may qualify, it's strongly suggested not that they even just talk to a lender, but possibly get pre-qualified or even pre-approved if that's available to that lender. So we kind of ran through that. We're going to see if there's some questions because we're able to put some questions on there. But I want to reinforce that it depends on the lender. These are guidelines. There are some situations where a customer or a buyer can do something less than the standard guidelines in what's called that extenuating circumstances. But in all cases, I would not assume that if they seem to fit one of these guidelines to have them sign a contract. I would definitely have them talk to a lender, find out what their guidelines are with regards to these situations, as well as even get them possibly not just pre-qualified, but even possibly pre-approved. That lender provides that option. That way you're going to know for sure, because these credit situations can be looked at differently with different lenders. They are somewhat severe, and there are some situations they can buy less than the standard time, but they've got to get their finances checked out ahead of time. Do we have any questions, Dan?
No questions yet, but so I'll take this moment to remind everyone that this PowerPoint and the PowerPoint from previous sessions that we've done, as Steve mentioned, are available and or will be available through the CABR office, through Annette. I believe they're also looking at posting them on the CABR site for access by members, and future PowerPoints that we do in future sessions. And as Steve mentioned, we have additional sessions scheduled. We're trying to do this on a regular monthly basis, and certainly your input, your suggestions for subject matter is very much appreciated by the committee so that we can continue to provide information. So whether you're a real estate agent or a lender, a lot of this is helpful, valuable information. We hope that's what the committee is trying to accomplish here. We don't have any questions yet, but please feel free. On the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a space where you can type in a question and then submit it to us. But so far there aren't any, so either we covered it very, very well or there's a technical issue. But certainly if you have any questions, you can send them to Annette and she can get them to us, or you can send them directly to Steve or me, and we're happy to answer that as a service and as participants on the committee. The most important thing, as Steve emphasized, and I will one more time as well, is what you see on the screen right now. Because these are guidelines, agency guidelines, and lenders' overlays or lenders' requirements can vary, the best thing to do if you have a client that has had one of these things, a short sale or a foreclosure, The best thing is to get them in touch with a lender that you know and trust so that they can be fully pre-approved. That's really the best thing for everybody involved. I believe one of our upcoming topics will be specific to bankruptcies, and we'll be covering that in an upcoming session.
It is not mentioned in this presentation, but I don't want to make sure that we don't assume anything, but after someone has met the time frames, be it 3 or 4 or 7 years, one thing that needs to happen too is that person needs to reestablish credit. That is a given. It's not mentioned in here, but after someone has had a foreclosure, short sale, they need to build and maintain their credit history, and that is as important. And sometimes they don't know how to do that, especially if it's fresh out of a foreclosure. They may have a hard time getting credit, and that's where they would be advised to get in touch with a credit counselor perhaps, or a lender that can give them some guidance as far as what they need to do, because that time that they're waiting after this event occurred is as important in building credit as the time they're going to need to wait before they can do something. So building the credit back up right away, starting right after a foreclosure or a short sale, is very, very important, and needs to be happening for those years up to when they can buy. So it's not out of the question of getting in a house after you've had one of these catastrophic events. It is possible, and just need to encourage the clients that they've got work to do, but it is possible. Anything else you'd like to add, Dan?
No, I think you covered it very well. We don't have any questions, and suddenly deed is spelled correctly now on every slide.
Well, great. Well, we appreciate everyone that's participated. Look for some future webinars coming up later this, I think the next one is in April, or is there one later this month?
I think we have one. Let me check real quick. I think we have one scheduled for later this month. And
yeah, we usually do them once a month, but given the spring buying season, it would suggest we do some twice a month. So I think we've got one later in March that we've got slated. So we're going to let that check that out and let you know here real quickly.
2 weeks from today at 9:30 again, the Home Path program is the next topic.
Okay, great.
And also, one thing I will add, excuse me, next week, if you guys aren't already aware, next week we have 2 terrific programs brought to you by the committee at the CABR office. On Wednesday the 13th, it's a 2-hour session, so 9:30 to 11:30 over at the CABR office, the USDA program. Vince Pommier from USDA in Columbus is coming down to do the 2-hour session, 2-hour CE, or people can join us that don't need the CE but want the information on the program. The USDA program is an awesome program. Buyers can finance 100% of the appraised value on a purchase transaction. They don't have to have perfect credit, but obviously have to have good credit. And some of the areas that are designated as rural might surprise you, although there are some changes coming soon on that Vince will get into next week. On Friday of next week, there's a 3-hour CE opportunity at the CABR, and it's with OFA, the Ohio Housing Finance Agency, and a gentleman from OFA is coming in on Friday for the 3 hours to do that class. And each class, if I'm not mistaken, is very inexpensive, next to free if you want the CE, and it is free if you don't want the CE. The OFA class, I'm sure that the presenter is going to talk about not only the bond money program, but also the mortgage credit certificate program, which in my humble opinion is very much underutilized. So these are 2 great opportunities to learn some very valuable information that we ought to all be sharing with our clients, and also CE opportunity as well.
All right, great. Thanks, Dan. We appreciate you participating, and we will be back doing another webinar in 2 weeks from today. Thanks again.